Huh. So, turns out you guys like Critical Role. Well, good thing, because I like talking about it. So, let's dive right in, and thank you guys so much for the views. I'm gonna try not to let you down. Let's go. When you think about Critical Role, what comes to mind? More than likely, for most people, the first thing that pops up is the name of at least one of the cast members. Laura Bailey, Ashley Johnson, Liam O'Brien, Sam Riegel, Travis Willingham, Marisha Ray, or the patron saints of DMs everywhere, Matthew Mercer himself. Oh, and let's not forget the eldritch deity, Taliesin Jaffe. But that makes sense, right? I mean, they are the main names in this show that has become incredibly popular. The point I'm making, however, is that Critical Role has become synonymous with the cast members who play in and have made it what it is today. They're essentially interchangeable at this point. So, I'm sure I was not alone when Campaign 2 was coming to a close and we all sat there waiting with bated breath for news on Campaign 3, and we were hit with this surprise announcement. Campaign 3 was not going to be coming out just yet, and instead of doing a series of one-shots in the midterm as they had previously, this time they were going to be running a short 8-episode campaign set in their world of Exandria. Cool, not too big of a deal, but pretty exciting, until...
This is a brand new adventure spanning 8 episodes set in Tal'Dorei, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be featuring some familiar faces, of course, as well as some brand new ones, including a new GM, the brilliant Abria Iyengar.
For anyone here who isn't a part of Critical Role, this was huge news. Since its inception in 2015, Critical Role has had one DM who has propelled its name into the spotlight due to the incredible trust the players have put in him, Matthew Mercer. As I stated in my last video, linked in the description, this man is so good and talented at DMing that a phenomenon was named after him in the Matthew Mercer effect to describe the event of players having too high expectations for their DMs after watching this man run his game. And when it comes to Critical Role, Matt has always been the DM. Sure, there have been a lot of one-shots where some different folks took the reins, but those were only for 1, maybe 2 sessions. Outside of this, there was a time where Brian Foster took the reins of a small miniseries that was run and remains the longest stint of Critical Role with a DM other than Matthew Mercer, as far as I know. Anyways, I'll admit I have not watched all their content. The point is, no one outside of Critical Role has truly taken the reins as DM. And no, I don't consider Brian as outside of Critical Role considering the large part he plays in their shows. And especially not for 8 whole episodes. Before this, Abria had been fairly unassociated with the name of Critical Role outside of some one-shot guest appearances and some participation in side shows like Narrative Telephone. But she was now going to be running a premiere series on their channel set in Exandria with the creator of the setting himself as a player, while on their main channel during a time where Critical Role Campaign 3 was not running, which makes her game the premier show on the channel to watch. So yeah, her running a game is a big deal for Critical Role. I want to talk about the effect Abria can potentially have on the Dungeons & Dragons community. I want to talk about the power of Exandria Unlimited. So let's talk about that. I've spoken before on the Matthew Mercer effect, so to be honest, I don't really feel like retreading that territory. However, it is important to the video I'm making today, so I'll summarize it very briefly. The Matthew Mercer effect is the phenomenon in which players and DMs alike can set unrealistic expectations for their games and pressure their group to the point of disallowing fun and an enjoyable game for the entire table. Now that's a pretty heavy simplification of a larger issue, but if you want to get a better understanding, I've linked a great video by Roll20 in the description describing the issue in detail. The reason I bring up this phenomenon yet again is because I think it's a symptom of an issue that has plagued D&D for some time, and that's the idea that there's a best way to DM. I know we're all plenty aware of the fact that there are different DMing styles and that every game table is different, yada yada yada, but to me, the very fact that the Matthew Mercer effect exists displays that even if we cerebrally understand that, subconsciously some of the D&D community still thinks that there's a best way to DM. And it's not hard to see why. There are very few DMs I know who look at how they DM and then look at how good Matt is at DMing and don't see ways that they can improve by imitating him. Matt is a good DM, and I consistently find myself watching him to learn how to improve my own games to his level. But let me make it clear, and I'm speaking as someone who holds Matthew Mercer as his hero. Matt is not the best DM. He's a great one, but he's not the best. because truthfully, I don't think there's such thing as a best DM. And to illustrate my point, I'm going to use an example. When you go to an art exhibit, do you try and find the best art piece? The one that clearly stands out among the rest? Or do you try and find the unique beauty and intent behind every single piece? My bet is 9 out of 10 people do the latter, and for the one person who's trying to find the best piece, I'm genuinely curious. How do you find it? Do you have a ranking system, some sort of point total? If you do, hit me up in the comments below, because I think that's kind of fascinating, but that's besides the point. You can't really judge art objectively because art is inherently subjective. If you look up the definition of art, you get this: the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. So art is an expression of an intangible thing in our imagination, which means it can't necessarily be judged at all. It's about expressing an idea, not scoring a ranking system. So, taking this back to the idea of Matthew Mercer's DMing, no matter how good he is, he can never be the best because it's not about being the best. It's about artistically creating, narrating, and developing a story for your friends to enjoy and collaborate in. Sure, you could look at a Picasso and say that's wonderful, and then look at a Van Gogh and admire his brushstrokes. You can learn from both those artists too, but you can't judge them against each other because that lacks the point of what art is. And honestly, based on that definition I read out earlier, DMing is art, just as painting, sculpting, writing, or dancing is. So what does all this have to do with Aabria DMing for Critical Role? Well, at the time of writing the script, only 2 episodes of Exandria Unlimited have come out, so please understand I'm working from limited content. Not only that, I have never seen another piece of media Aabria has been in outside of what she's joined in on Critical Role, and that's actually something I'd like to continue to do until I finish this video. Why? Because I want to see this topic purely from the point of view of a fan of Critical Role, and nothing more. You see, I myself have fallen into the trap of thinking that Critical Role is the best way to play D&D in the past, to the point of actively deciding not to watch other streams simply because I didn't like how different they were from Critical Role. I'll admit I've come a long way since then, but there was definitely a time when I had that mindset, and I'm more than willing to bet that I am not the only one who has had that mindset in the past. So with that viewpoint in mind, and the fact that Aabria is DMing a game that is canon to the world of Exandria in the Critical Role space is a big deal to me. She is the first person to actually have a say on the canon of the world in-universe outside of a few funny one-shot adventures like Grog's one-shot and whatnot, and I want to see her game from the viewpoint of any critter, skeptically and curiously. Now, please do not hear me say that I am watching to see if she fails, because nothing could be further from the truth, and I think she's doing a magnificent job already. But her being in as official of a DM seat as possible to replace the Matthew Mercer has an interesting side effect. It lets us see Critical Role, considered to be one of, if not the best D&D games out there, from the eyes of a DM other than Matt. It lets us see that the game can be just as amazing, just as magical, without having the stamp of approval from Matthew Mercer. And when I say stamp of approval, I don't mean that Matthew is giving that stamp of approval. I mean, a lot of times the internet will consider things given a stamp of approval if Matt's name is on it. It's sort of a confirmation bias sort of thing. So, it lets us see that different DMing styles are just as valid to create just as amazing of a game. And I believe it may begin to shift the perception of the D&D community from what a good DM should be to what a good DM could be. DMing is just like art, and I think each DM can have their own massively unique style that makes them stand out and create a game like no other, and I think that should be addressed more. Now, let me make it clear, I in no way desire for people to be less like Matt. Like I've stated previously, that man with his flowing brown locks and charming smile is my hero. And yeah, I've got a bit of a man crush on him. Don't judge. So I have no desire to discount or downplay the amazing work he's done, and the fact that Critical Role is what it is today in no small part because of his incredible DM work. But I actually speak with relative confidence that Matt would agree that people shouldn't strive to be like him, but instead to learn from him and develop their own unique DMing skill.
I'm sure we could find some. Food! They're not getting back to me, so...
I don't even know what to do with that.
She just calls out for anything.
The kitchen ghost responds, there's food here!
Dariax is over there drying off his spear with the curtains and goes, does that actually work?
Hey, or you there, boy. That looks like fine fruit. Where would you go shopping for things here? Markety things. Also, spice?
Yes! Oh my god!
No. No.
Do you spice?
Do you spice?
Yo, you cool? You cool, dog?
Préstame? I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm not an authority. Do you spice? Spice it?
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Let's go. Ignore that part. Thank you so much. What do you think? A little spice?
Kind of just puts his hand out.
I flip him a coin.
As I showed in the clips just a moment ago, Abria and Matt have a vastly different DMing style. In both clips, there was a very similar scenario of a player doing something totally out of left field and confusing the DM while giving no input on where to go next. And they both handled it wildly differently. Matt rolled with it while in character, having the NPC display the same confusion anyone might, while Abria outright called the absurdity of the action out of game in order to laugh at it. Both reactions from DMs led to laughter and a fun story, but both were very different ways of handling the situation. Let's look at another example of Abria's DMing.
And maybe like a block or two away, within view of like a little green space, kind of a park, is like a little outdoor restaurant, is part of an inn called The Third Wing. Didn't just make that up right now.
There it is.
Fine. Wing. Oh, it's so fast before you did stuff that I didn't prepare for.
Questions. Is it like
Obviously, she was improvising, and good on her because that's what D&D is all about. But how many times have we seen Matt improvise something on the spot and never let anyone know it wasn't planned until far later during interviews on Talks Machina? Both of them have such vastly different ways of handling that situation, but both are amazing. Matt's way has a way of fleshing out the world and making it feel real and lived in, like no matter where you go, he's got it planned out and ready to hand you at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, Abria's shows a sense of freedom and flexibility, like anything can happen because everyone at the table knows you're creating this story together and you're all creating the world. Both are awesome and amazing, and both lead to two different types of equally fascinating types of games. This is exactly why I think Critical Role letting Abria take the DMing seat in such an official capacity is an absolute game changer for D&D as a whole. Because by doing so, she is showing the Critter community, which is huge, that different art styles for DMing exist, different ways to play, to explore. It's not downplaying Matt, not in the slightest, but instead it's showing why his DMing, and hers by extension, is so good, because they are unique styles that create unique games. And, following this logic, this means no one can run a game like they do. It's entirely unique and a wonderful experience. And the truth is, I know that I'm not the first one to come to this realization. I know plenty of people know this and realize this, but seeing Abria in the actual DMing seat helps us cognitively actually understand what's going on, and helps our subconscious begin to realize it as well. I don't know if this is the case for everyone, but for me it's a lot like knowing a concept, but then there's that moment where it clicks and you finally understand. And for me, seeing Abria in the DMing seat helps me understand how many different types of beautiful DMing styles there really are. Which then leads to the ultimate conclusion I'm hoping to make in this video. No one can run a game like you. Just like artists, DMs can always improve and learn from each other. There's always a better session to run. But no one can run a session like me, or like you, or your DM. It's all unique, which means each campaign is one piece of art to the next. Not all are great, and not all are what you hoped they would be, but they're all pieces of art which can be learned from for the next project, the next beautiful story that you can share with the world with your friends. D&D is art, and playing is the act of creating art with your friends that will never be able to be replicated, and each is beautiful in its own way, and that's awesome. Abria taking the DMing spotlight has shown me this, and I hope everyone else can enjoy in this revelation. Abria, thank you for being willing to take the impossibly terrifying seat of Matthew Mercer himself, even if it's only for a time. You've got some serious guts to do that. And Matt, thank you for being so talented and genuine to show us all what it's like to pour everything into a game. I would encourage anyone watching this video to keep your eyes on Abria, and go watch other DMs too. There's always more to learn, and that's what makes this hobby the best I could ever ask for. Go out into the world and make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day. Thank you. Come again.